First of all, welcome, and I appreciate Gateway having me today. I love that everyone joining comes from a different place, and I hope that I can cover a lot of your questions in the presentation. So just before I start, it is on guardianship and trusteeship, and the language that I use comes from the law itself. And so you'll hear the term adult, the adult, and that's because that's a legal term in the Guardianship and Trusteeship Act. And that would refer to someone that requires guardianship or trusteeship that's over the age of 18. So the information that I'm going to give you is all governed through the Adult Guardian and Trusteeship Act. And all of this information can be found on the Office of the Public Guardian Trustee website. So the other thing that I think is really unique about this, because I'm really used to dealing with the PDD supported people, and that's because I also come at this as a mom. I'm a mom to a 22-year-old man with Down syndrome. And so, but that being said, that guardianship and trusteeship is not in any way related to having to be PDD supported. So I think some of the first slides that we'll go through will actually be really relevant to some of the youth who are able to make a lot of their own decisions. So please feel free to stop me at any time. And Sahana, please feel free to hurry me along if I'm taking too long. So I'm going to start. I have a shared screen. Everybody can see that. So let's see if I can share that. So what we'll do today is just go over these topics. So we'll start with the specific decision-making, co-decision-making, supported decision-making, guardianship, trusteeship, and capacity assessment. These terms are not made-up terms. I know that we like to say things like, well, I'm a co-decision maker with my son or my daughter or the person that I work with, but in terms of a legal sense, co-decision making is actually a legal term. So sometimes, like I know when I first filled out the forms, I filled them out wrong because I was thinking I was doing supported decision making and co-decision making, but in fact, those each have applications. So I'll go through each of these. So specific decision making. This is going to be our first topic, and specific decision making is time sensitive. It's like a one-time option. So it will deal with only two areas, and that's healthcare and housing. So I'll pull those up. So sorry, I just have to move my face over here so I can see my screen. So it's pretty straightforward. This would deal with like the one-time decision where a doctor or a healthcare professional will assess capacity, and they can allow somebody to make a decision on healthcare, like a procedure, an exam or a treatment, or housing. They would not allow decisions for like sterilization of an individual, for tissue transplants, or for end-of-life decisions. So, and this can be done, a physician or a dentist can pull this form up and fill it out and have an assessment and have it done, and it doesn't have to go in front of a court immediately. So, pretty straightforward. And this may be good for like some one-off decisions for some of the people you support. I'm gonna go on to. So co-decision making. So co-decision making, like the title suggests, this type of decision making involves working through decisions together. It is court authorized, so you can't call yourself a co-decision maker without a court order. And ultimately, the adult has the final say in the decision making. And that would even include a decision that maybe goes against the conversation that you had with them, they can actually make their own decision on after getting all of the information, and it may be different than what you want it to be. So again, this is a court ordered form that would have to be filled in. So the adult would decide if they even want a co-decision maker, who that co-decision maker is. They might be a trusted family member or friend, and they can also decide when they want to stop having a co-decision maker involved. And remembering that with the guidance and support, the adult can choose to make a decision contrary to that advice, which is not unusual. So adults who might need a co-decision maker just may need a little bit of help understanding information, and they may need some guidance and support to make personal decisions. Any questions about either of those? I think I have one more slide on youth. Let me just go to that. So minors who will need a co-decision maker. So the minor would be 18 in the next year. If you want to go this route, you should start when they turn 17, when a minor turns 17, so that's in place when they are 18. And this would be somebody who needs some guidance and support to make personal decisions. So I think that a lot of the youth might fall into this category. And part of your role may be just having them identify who their co-decision maker may be. I think that's it for co-decision making. Let me just double check. So, okay, the court would decide. So the court would decide the types of decisions that the co-decision maker can help with. And the court would also decide if a co-decision-making review will be needed. So these could be like short-term during transition. So there may be like very time-limited decisions that need to be made. They may be in place for a year, or the court can decide that they'll put them in place for the first 5 years or 10 or never. And that is all decided. We'll hit the capacity assessment, but these are all things in the capacity assessment tool. And then the court also decides if co-decision making is even needed. Any questions about co-decision making or specific decision making? Okay. And then the last point would be the court would also decide if an adult only needs help communicating or understanding healthcare treatment. And then if it's just really a specific thing about doing a medical treatment, then they may just do a supported decision-making agreement instead of an actual co-decision-making agreement. Okay, so you can't have a co-decision maker if you have a personal directive, if you have a guardianship order, or if you have a trusteeship order. Now, the reason this is because with a guardianship or trusteeship order, the adult no longer has decision-making ability. That decision-making ability has been legally granted to a guardian or a trustee. They also have a co-decision maker if they have a personal directive, because in a personal directive, that decision-making would be already identified to another individual. So if I have a guardianship order on my child, I know that they can go and pick a friend to come in and help them make a decision. Does that make sense to everyone? We can touch back on that too, if we need to. So the next thing the court offers is supported decision-making as an option. And these are a little bit different than like a full guardianship or a full trusteeship, the supported decision-making. So if the adult is capable of making a lot of their decisions on their own, and they only need help making some non-financial decisions, then supported decision making is another option that you can go. Now, the reason it's non-financial is because anytime that a financial decision needs to be made, that would fall under a trusteeship application. So again, all of the ones that I've just covered are for non-financial decisions. So a supporter can help when the adult is maybe sick or has mild disabilities that interfere with decision making, or they don't speak English well, so they don't understand what's being asked of them. If they're facing complex decision where they normally can make really good decisions about the minor things in their life, but a complex decision comes to them, they may need a supporter for that. And then when the adult can actually name a supporter when they do a personal directive or when they do a will, they can say, listen, if there's ever a complex decision that I need help with, I'm naming this person to be that person that can help me with it. And the unique thing about the supporter, I'll just go to the next slide. Oh, it's on the next one. Okay, so let me just see if I can flip to the next slide and come back to this one. Sorry about that. So the supporter has the legal authority to access the adult's personal information, like their medical records, and then help the adult think through the decision. So that's a little bit different than if you were just a parent. I'm not sure if any of you have adult children and you've ever tried to access their personal health records. You're always turned down, right? Because now your child all of a sudden turned 18 and you're no longer considered guardian. So that would be for any child. So, but as a supporter, let's say you were supporting a grandparent or you were supporting an adult, that you can actually legally access the adult's personal information. So I'm going to jump backwards, go back to what a supporter can help with. So they can contact doctors, they can contact pharmacists, they can contact care and service providers and employers. So supporters are really good because it still allows the adult to have a lot of say in the decisions in their life, but they may need help in these areas, and you can have a supporter, talk to maybe a doctor or pharmacist about what's needed and then help translate that information to the adult that they're supporting. Any questions about that one? No? Okay, so we talked about that. So if you want to be a supporter, you have to be over the age of 18. You need to have a trusting relationship with the adult, and you can be a relative or a friend of the adult as well. So this would not be a situation where you'd have a public trustee acting as a supporter. So we're going to get a little bit more into the meat of things, and this is guardianship. The guardianship and the trusteeship applications are really quite big, and they're much broader in sense of losing one's ability to make decisions for themselves. And so when you become a guardian, the court gives you legal authority to make personal decisions for the adult. Once a guardianship is in place, they can be reversed, but they're very difficult to reverse, and there is a big process to have them reversed. And then the adult at this point would lose their ability to make decisions for themselves. So I think that you really have to keep that in mind if you want to go for full guardianship. So an adult who might need a guardian would be for somebody that isn't capable of making personal decisions. They may be vulnerable. That's, again, the terminology that the OPGT uses because of a permanent or temporary disability or illness. And they don't have a personal directive and need someone to make decisions for them. So if you're ever wondering if your kids can come and get guardianship of you, well, if you have a personal directive, they can't. But if you don't, they certainly can apply to the courts for that. So minors who will need an adult guardian, they'll be 18 years old in the next year. They'll need someone to make their personal decisions after they become an adult. And if you want the court order to go into effect when they turn 18, you really need to start that application when they're 17. I found that the courts take about 6 months. They say 3 to 6 months. I have not had any go through the court system in a 3-month period. So guardians cannot make decisions about certain things. They cannot make decisions about finances. That would be covered under the trusteeship. I should qualify that statement though with the finances. With AISH, you can be what they call a supported decision maker specifically and only for AISH, and you don't have to apply to a court for that. You cannot make decisions about organ donation. You cannot make decisions about sterilization, and and depending on the adult's needs, a guardian might only be needed for some decisions. Now, this would be decided when the capacity assessment's done. So we'll talk about that at the end of this presentation. I did a little bit up on the capacity assessment. So the court would decide the types of decisions the guardian can make. And then these decisions are based on the capacity assessment report that's done. So you don't have to worry that anyone's going to do a guardianship, because first of all, a capacity assessment report has to be done. So nobody can take away your guardianship to make decisions for yourself. So again, guardians can make personal, non-financial decisions about healthcare. This would be one box that the assessor would look at, about living arrangements, about education, about social activities, and about employment. I don't think. And legal proceedings. So these are the areas that a capacity assessor would look at and determine whether or not the adult has the ability to make decisions, prudent decisions in these areas. So trusteeship, again, trusteeship, some parents are advised that if their child only has AISH coming in, that a trusteeship isn't needed. Certainly a trusteeship, if there is a large estate, a trusteeship would probably be in their best interest if they're not able to make decisions around finances, or if their vulnerability is such that somebody could take advantage of them financially. So a trusteeship can be given if an adult isn't capable of making financial decisions. And then once the trusteeship is granted, the court will give you legal authority to make financial decisions for the adult. Now, that being said, there are limitations to that. For example, if you wanted to sell the adult's home, you would have to ask for a specific granting of that decision. And often some of those bigger things, even if you are a trustee, have to go back to the court for approval. And it's just one of the layers that the Alberta government acts have put in to protect adults who are in need of a trusteeship. So a trustee basically, for the most part, would use the adult's money to pay for their bills and their care and their education, kind of those monthly rent and that type of thing. They might help them manage their investments. A lot of families I see have started RDSPs. That would be something that they would manage. And then they would apply for the adult's financial benefits like old age security. This being said, there is a responsibility of a trustee to act as to act to ensure that all of these things that are available, like old age security and age and those type of things, have been applied for. That's a responsibility that the courts would look at and hold you accountable and responsible for doing. So again, a trustee can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a trust company, and it can be a public trustee. Now I put a little asterisk beside public trustee, and I should have put one beside public guardian, because public trustee and public guardian are kind of like last choices. A public trustee will always ask, you know, is there a family member? Is there a trusted friend? Before they get involved in becoming a public trustee. A public trustee can charge the estate for doing the work of trusteeship. So you can keep that in mind as well. And then again, a trustee can't make decisions about medical treatment, and they can't make decisions about where the adult lives. Those would fall under a guardianship order. Any questions? No? Okay. So who can make the application to a court? I'm sure most of you knew that SAGE at one point was doing guardianship and trusteeship applications. They were funded through the government to do these, so the charge was not going directly to the families. However, it was being paid for by the government through a contract with SAGE. At this point, and as always, you could always go through a lawyer to have your application done. You can do it yourself. It's difficult, but definitely you can have it done yourself. Or there's other people like myself that offer this service. I actually work with a lawyer, and the lawyer has given me a rate that I pass on to the people that go through me for the application. So it's probably less than about half than what you'd pay with a normal application with a lawyer. But certainly you can do it by yourself. And if you know a notary, your MLA, for example, is a notary, they can sign your forms for you for free. So I'm going to talk a little bit about capacity assessments. So the capacity is a person's ability to understand facts about a decision. So again, a capacity assessment is a legal form. It's provided to the court, and the court uses that information in the capacity assessment to help determine whether a co-decision maker, a guardian, or a trustee should be appointed for an adult. My experience has shown me that unless you are very specific about wanting a co-decision maker or a supported decision maker, most physicians will fill it out and you'll end up with guardianship unless you're really specific about wanting less support than that. And that's often because physicians aren't aware that those other options are available. So what happens when you have when capacity is assessed? So there has to be a really legitimate reason why you'd even be asking for a capacity assessment. And when the capacity assessor comes out, they'll ask about the adult situation. They'll ask the adult what the concerns are about their ability to make decisions, and the adult has the opportunity to even say they don't want a capacity assessment done. They can say they don't want to be assessed, they don't want to have their capacity assessed, and the capacity assessor would make notes on that. And so I know a lot of families struggle with having the capacity assessment done because they have children who are yes and no answer people. Do you want a capacity assessment done? No. And the next day you could ask them, do you want a capacity assessment done? Yes. Do you want a capacity assessment done? No. So the capacity assessor does go through about 4 or 5 pages just of questions, and they might make a note that they've decided that capacity assessment needs to be done, even though the adult said no, that the adult was maybe just parroting what they heard 5 minutes before. So they'll make notes like that in the capacity assessment report. So the assessor will focus on the types of decisions that need to be assessed. So they would maybe talk about healthcare decisions with full understanding of outcomes. So you may ask your child that's becoming the adult about healthcare decisions, and they would have, you know, like I know if it was my son, he would say no to everything if it came to anything related to a doctor. So they really try and ask a number of questions to see what that level of understanding is going to be. They often meet with the adult alone without support in the room, so just be aware of that. They'll ask about residential decisions. They, they may come up at the end to say there's no concerns about capacity for personal or financial decisions. So all of these, I think there's one more, yeah. And they'll discuss with the adult their understanding of specific decisions. So if your child's answering, or if the adult's answering yes to everything or no to everything, they do try and ask the question in a different way or use different terminology to see if they can actually see whether or not the adult really understands what's being asked of them. I should note, I'll go right back, that capacity assessors are listed on the OPGT website. There is a cost associated with them. If you use someone private, it's normally about $700, I think is the maximum that a capacity assessor can charge. A lot of people use their physicians for this, and sometimes there's a charge, sometimes there's not. I've seen it anywhere from $40 up to maybe a couple hundred, about $200 with a family doctor. And then when would you start a capacity assessment? Capacity assessment's only valid for 6 months prior to an application to the court. So you wouldn't want to, if it's greater than 6 months, you'd have to get another capacity assessment done. So you kind of want to watch your timing with that. So if you're planning on an application for guardianship in, let's say, July, you'd maybe want to get the capacity assessment done in June. So don't get it done if you're not ready to start your application. And there is normally a cost associated with it. So just some extra things that you might want to know. Just need a little bit of water, sorry. Apologies. There is a cost to the application, and now there's also a cost to the background check. And that's charged by the government of Alberta. The cost of the application is $250, and the cost of the background check is, I believe, $61 now. And that just came out, the background check came out April 1st of this year. So timing of your application should coincide with your capacity assessment. Just know that the interviews may be done without anyone else present, and that if you do the application on your own, that there is a notary requirement for that. So I'd just like to share just a little bit about me quickly. So I am a registered nurse. I have my own business. I do a full service with all the legal documents included. I'm a little bit different than most people because I am covered by the Health Information Act. That means that the information that you share with me medically, I have certain laws that a lawyer wouldn't be covered with in terms of what I do with your medical information and the information that I collect. I use a state connection. It's a lawyer that's local to me, and this lawyer works very closely with me, understands what I'm doing. And so my business uses her, but we don't have the cost that she would normally charge because I'm doing the work for not the lawyer and not the lawyer staff. So the other thing is, if you want to apply for reimbursement of a cost of a guardianship or a trusteeship, you can only do that if you use a lawyer. So because I use a lawyer for mine, the applicant can apply for reimbursement of the cost or have it paid for out of the adults' funds. So all of the information that's on this PowerPoint, it can be found on the Government of Alberta Office of the Public Guardian Trustee website. And I'll go back. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for the presentation. So given the diversity of the audience today, I was thinking that maybe we can go person to person and maybe share if it may be a specific question you have about one individual you're supporting, or it could be generally the individuals you tend to support have certain factors that impact them. So maybe we can speak to specific or general questions, and that way Wendy can kind of maybe see what you need to know in addition to what you shared. Just to go by alphabetical order, Brenalyn.
I'm the first one.
So, alphabetical by first name.
Yeah. So think about, Brenalyn, as you're thinking about the question, think about, okay, who do I normally support? What are their typical situations? Is there any specific situation you want to ask about? And which part of this made sense, didn't make sense? What do you want repeated? Any of that?
Oh, everything made sense. Like all the information that that was presented was very, very helpful, because currently I'm dealing with an adult. She's 21 and we've been having difficulty applying for PDD for her. It was because she doesn't have any diagnosis prior to turning 18, so there's no way that she would. Although over the years, like after turning 18, we believe because of addictions, like the hardcore use of drugs has impacted her brain. And I don't know what happened one time when she was missing, and then something happened along that time where when she was found, she can no longer speak clearly. There's a lot of cognitive decline. So we're stuck. However, with the capacity assessment that we're hoping to, because we're trying to like apply for guardianship and hoping for a guardianship and trusteeship as well. With the capacity assessment, I heard that like with the presentation, Wendy mentioned that the adult has the right to refuse with the capacity assessment. So is there any way that we could go around that? So
okay, I'll just jump in there. So yes, an adult does have the right to refuse a capacity assessment. And that's why I think it's really important, if you are talking to the adult, if they can understand why that capacity assessment is being requested. It certainly should never be adversarial, where we're going in and we're trying to take away your rights and your abilities. Maybe just in the explanation that this is to support you and that you can be a part of this. If the capacity so in short, there is another route you would have to take if they refuse the capacity assessment. But I think through some education and just explaining some of the things, like that this is a safeguard, especially if you're going to do like co-decision making or that kind of thing, that it's actually to protect them from and their vulnerabilities from the outside people. If they refuse, the capacity assessor can assess their ability to kind of refuse while they're doing it. And then you would make an application to the court outside of that.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other situations, Brennan, that you might want to talk about?
No, that answered my
That
question.
answered? Okay.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Brendan, I'd also like to say too that the adult that you're supporting can still be, even if they're not eligible for PDD, they can certainly be eligible for AISH and financial support that way. Like, you don't have to be on PDD to be eligible for AISH.
Yeah, she's on age, and the age commenced on like the first day of April. So we're happy about that. Like, at least she has something going. However, there's more support that she needed, like 24/7 care. But with all the medical tests that was done, there's nothing that they found, right? So we're hoping that she could complete a neuropsych assessment. That would be our next step, and hopefully we can get something from that. Yeah.
Right, so in the neuropsych assessment may or may not end up giving you a diagnosis, but it may give you information that's beneficial to still apply for PDD, because there are people without diagnosis that are eligible for PDD. That said, there are other programs out there, like a home care program if there's a medical need for non-PDD support. So if they need help maybe with cooking or bathing and things like that, that can still go through home care without PDD.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I think next we have Fiona.
I really enjoyed the presentation. It was a lot of new information for me. The one worry that I have is the capacity assessment. And if you could just expand on who would be doing that. Who, you said there was a you could use a doctor. Who else would be doing the?
So psychologists can do them. Physicians can do them. The physicians and psychologists take a course it's a very general course, 1-day course on how to fill out the forms. But there also are, there's a list on the OPGT website of local, so if you're up in Fort McMurray or if you're in Hinton or any part of the province, you can find a capacity assessor in your area. But again, they do charge a lot more. So if you can go through your family doctor, that would be probably the best person to use.
Okay, thank you.
Wendy, just to follow up on Fiona's question, what would you tell the family doctor? What's the, how do you explain this? Like, what would you say to them?
I'd like to apply for guardianship of my adult son or daughter, or whoever you're applying for, and it requires a capacity assessment. I'm really concerned about these areas, right? For example, I have a guardianship on my son, but my physician didn't check off the box on friends. So he can basically have anybody he chooses as a friend. And I was a little bit concerned because I feel like there's a lot of people that could be around him that could cause him issues. So you might want to have those kind of conversations with your physician before you go in. I wasn't aware of it at the time that I did it. And so until I got my court order back and realized he can pretty much have anybody he wants into his house. So.
Okay. And do you know how much it costs for a capacity assessment if someone else is doing it other than the family physician?
So by law, they can charge up to $700. They can't charge beyond that. And that's set out again by the government of Alberta. Okay.
And is there a requirement on, let's say there's a doctor that they're able to get a hold of. Yep. And when you say a walk-in, doctor, or does it have to be a family physician? And how do you distinguish the two? How long should the doctor have known the person before?
Well, that's just it. I think that a lot of the walk-in doctors would just not feel comfortable doing a capacity assessment. You do have to have some kind of relationship and knowledge of that person.
Mm-hmm.
So it would really be up to that physician to decide whether or not they wanted to go ahead with that assessment.
Okay.
Wendy, did you say that to do a capacity assessment, you would have to take a course to know how to fill out the forms?
Well, the psychologists need to, the psychologists do. I believe I don't know if the physicians do, but I do know the psychologists do, because I get the little reports of like when the next course is. And registered nurses can also do them, and social workers, but they definitely need to take a course on doing them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesse.
Hey, I don't know if I necessarily have any questions at this moment. I'm just kind of processing through. So if I have anything, I will definitely email you guys, but definitely it was a good presentation. I have one youth that is 19, and his mom has full guardianship. And so it's kind of just interesting to see how that process works, because it's a long process, right? And so I just had kind of like maybe a point or a question for everyone else is maybe what is people's experiences with having a family member be a trustee, or because I know that can cause some tension and friction maybe. I mean, my youth has a public trustee, so otherwise him and his mom would just fight all the time. So I'm wondering if any of you have any youth with family members as trustee, and how you kind of navigate through that system and help with that.
Great question. Feel free to jump in, folks, and respond. Wendy, do you have any thoughts?
I think it's a great question. I just dealt with a family whose adult son really did have a big issue with his mom being a trustee. So there was an application made for the courts to take that over. I think that definitely, depending on the adult that's involved, they may want to have a little bit more say in what happens to their finances. There is a clause in the trusteeship application that you can allow a certain amount of money to be given to the adult in their own bank account. They can hold their own bank account, normally up to about $3,500 a month, where they don't have to be reporting on where they're using it or how they're using it or anything like that. And sometimes that helps mitigate some of those issues a little bit. But I do think, yeah, for sure, that's a common problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Wendy, just piggybacking on Jamie's question, you said it's best if Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee is the last resort. Can you speak a little more to that and why you said that? And
so OPGT will, I mean, it's a job for them to do. If you have a family member that can do that, that would be their first recommendation, that somebody in the family does it. Once you give that power over to OPGT, it's pretty much gone. They make those decisions based on a set of values that could be very different than your own. It's just been my experience, Sahana, the feedback I get is, do they have a family member? Do they have a friend? Can they hire a trust company? And then if all of those are no, then they are the last line.
mm-hmm. And is there any workshop or some sort of a learning opportunity for family members or extended family members to take that would help them, reduce the tension and the conflicts that can arise? Do you know of any?
I don't know, Sahana.
Okay. Because Jesse's question is like, yeah, it's a very valid issue. A lot of the times, especially when you're a service provider supporting young people, conflicts with families are quite common, and OPGT become the only option. And so it might be some sort of a nice interlude there, maybe something for Gateway to think about.
Hannah, I do think that that would be a great thing for Gateway to offer, is that mediation type support, because even in terms of having agency support, there's also, it's like a triad, right? There's the agency, the parent, and then the individual that's getting support. And where does the alliance lie for the agency, to the guardian or to the individual they support? And so I see that conflict come up time and again. So yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
A good thing to explore.
Yeah.
That mediation piece.
Mm-hmm. Jesse's question prompts another question. I'm sure Jesse and Kitty probably are thinking of too, is now let's say we're supporting a young person, and a foster family or an extended family member appears in the situation, are willing to take on trusteeship and guardianship. And as you said, OPGT applications will always first ask, hey, is there a family member? And that's the first preference. Now, what if, as a professional support, you know that the family member that has shown up is probably not a good idea. It's probably, they may have some ulterior motive or what have you. What can you do? How do you relate that to OPGT? Are they open to that? But then again, you don't want the individual to not have a family member support. So a lot of times professional caregivers, support workers are stuck between, what to do. What is a way around it? Or have you come across these situations? Any advice?
Yeah, so the application has an area for a desk application, which is the fastest, or for a hearing application. So when you do an application, let's say you're a foster parent and you start the application process through your agency for a guardianship. On that, you have to name all of the interested people. That would be like siblings, if there's a spouse involved, if there's parents involved. They all have to go down on that form. Once the OPGT office gets that form, they send out information to every person that's listed as an interested person. And those people have 45 days to say, hey, no, wait a second. I don't want the foster parent applying for guardianship of my child. Or, hey, no, I want to be a part of my child's life now, and I want to be the guardian. And then that would bump it over to a hearing. So everybody would show up in front of a judge with a lawyer, and they would make their case in front of a judge for why they should be the better guardian, why they would be the better guardian. And so the judge would make the final decision on who would be the guardian. Now, that being said, there could be a division of what a guardian can do. So they may name more than one guardian. One guardian may be responsible just for housing. Another guardian might be responsible only for medical decisions. And so a judge could make a decision that maybe that family member may be best for medical decisions, but not really good for those day-to-day decisions, let's say social activities, friendships, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So for sure, that does happen, that can happen. And instead of, you being the decider on they're not really good, you would go to court and present that information in front of a judge.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Wendy. I believe the next is Katie. Do you have any questions?
That answered my question. I think you know exactly what I was thinking of, Sahana.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gets tricky when we were trying to figure out if we didn't necessarily agree with who was applying for guardianship, but we didn't necessarily have a viable option for who would be a better person to do so. And being a professional, you're kind of in a limited capacity because that's a big commitment that you can't necessarily take.
And we also have that feeling like, who am I to say that they're not the best person, right?
Yeah,
But sometimes just bringing that forward in front of a judge, it really then comes down to the judge having to make the decision, or placing a public guardian as the guardian until a better guardian can be found, or limiting what that guardian who applies can be responsible for. So keeping the involvement but minimizing it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Katie, do you have any questions? I think Renee was also watching with you, maybe.
No, I gotta have my partner Renee come on because we have a 20-year-old. He has Asperger's, and we currently aren't set up for anything like this. He had no resources as he was younger, so he'll be on tonight to go through that. But thank you, it's been very informative. I've been texting him as we're going through this presentation, and we have a lot to do. We also have a 6-year-old that will be probably going through this process as well, but it's really eye-opening. It's something I should have known about, but I just I appreciate the information.
Thanks, Katie. That brings us to Nancy. You're muted, Nancy, so I'm just gonna.
I have a son who's 17, will be 18 June the 9th. I've had all the paperwork and everything, and then I had contacted Sage the beginning of February and found out that the government had cut funding. She said, give me a few weeks and I'll get back to you. We might set something up. And then the coronavirus hit. So I am in holding pattern right now. I have everything from the doctor. I have a psychological assessment that the school had done, but I'm running out of time.
When was your capacity assessment dated?
From the doctor?
Yeah.
January.
So January, February, March, April, May, June. Yeah, you have to get the application in before June.
And I have all the pages printed off, and I started doing it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is way over my head.
Well, and the thing with those forms, although I don't like speaking poorly of the OPGT office, they'll say things like, can you average out what the monthly expenses will be? And so let's say they're $1,136 and you put $1,100, they'll send those forms back to you, because really they don't mean estimate, they mean give us the actuals.
Well, see, and I don't even think I'm that far, because I'm afraid of doing it wrong, because I'm doing it myself, and somebody says if you do it yourself, they're going to send it back, and I'm thinking, well, why am I doing it then?
Yeah, it's not unusual for families to get them back 3, 4, 5 times, and it can be over some silly things. So
I was waiting to see, well, and now I have your email here, that I'm thinking, okay, maybe I need to reach out to you to help me, because I don't have a lot of time. And then I thought, well, maybe I just don't get his guardianship and I just keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah,
but he'll always
too.
But he'll always give my name.
And that's fine until it's not fine, right? Until you run into a situation where they will, where he needs that support and it's not there. So
yeah. So I think I wrote down your email, and I'll probably reach out to you for help.
Okay.
Okay. That also brings me to something I'm mentioning in the chat for folks is for any future questions regarding guardianship or trusteeship as per this today's event, please reach out to Unique. I've written her email address there. What we could do is we can either coordinate, we can do a few things. Unique can coordinate with Wendy to perhaps do another presentation in your respective organizations, or Unique can coordinate with Wendy and a couple of other contacts that we have to answer any questions that you may have on guardianship and trusteeship. And lastly, Wendy does have her own service where she does applications for people. And it's for private guardianship and private trusteeship, correct, Wendy?
Yeah.
Okay, and so she can be reached as well. And Gateway is happy to be an intermediary to help people find the right contacts for your solutions. Okay, so Nancy, glad that you reached out to Wendy. That's great. The next person we have is, gosh, okay, Shauna. My alphabets are being tested here. Shauna, not Shona, just to confuse us all. Okay.
Hi there. I'm kind of in the same position as Nancy, except I haven't started any paperwork or anything yet. And same, I had contacted Sage and they no longer offered the help that they were providing. My son turned 17 in June, and with the COVID-19 thing happening, I just wanted to get a really good head start on it and just look for some help. And even the idea of trying to find a right lawyer, a decent lawyer, was very daunting. So this course came up, so I decided I better get on and see what I could find out. So it's been very helpful.
So also with that, at 17, you can apply, you can still apply early at 17. What you would do is just ask the court to have that guardianship go into effect, or the trusteeship go into effect on the 18th birthday. So as long as it's within that year, you can ask the court for that.
So I could start applying at this time?
Yeah, you could. And then they would just wait, and then next June, when he turns 18, it would just automatically go into effect and it would be done. And like I said, it does take about 6 months to go through. Now that there's COVID, it's funny, I have got a few back in 5 months. I think the courts are a little bit being used a little bit less, so things are a little bit more speedy over there right now.
Okay, I was worried it would take much longer.
No, in fact, it's the opposite.
Okay. And likewise, I probably be sending you an email, Wendy, and asking for your help and explaining our situation a little bit more and see if there's something we could do together.
Yeah.
Wendy, do you want to perhaps speak to like what your costs are? Is that something that you do one-on-one? Is that something you share more generally? Does it depend on the situation?
It does depend on the situation. It would really depend on whether you're going for a desk application or a hearing application, if you're doing guardianship, if you're doing trusteeship, or if you're doing both, what level of involvement I would have in that. If you want to use the lawyer service, if you needed to apply for the cost to be covered, all of that kind of thing. So.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy. I do know that you have very reasonable prices, so that's something I think I can safely mention. All right, Shona. Oh, you're muted, Shona. Sorry. If you can just, at the bottom of your, there you go.
Oops. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
One question that I have, my son, he's 26, he has no guardian or trustee. And in my will, I have redone my will to have a trust company help my son out financially when I'm gone, because he has direct family members who would completely rip him off if I'm not there to make sure everything's okay. So if in my son's lifetime, if anybody was to go for trusteeship or guardianship, how does that affect what's presented in my will of having a trust company once I'm gone? Is there conflict?
Well, definitely somebody could come forward in the family and challenge that that decision that you made to have a trust company. Again, it would need to go in front of a judge, and they would have to make a case that they would be better able to provide that service as opposed to a trust company. That would be very difficult. It wouldn't be impossible, but they may then ask, you said you have a son?
Yes.
Son?
Yes.
So they may involve him in that decision making and ask if he would want his family members to maybe be the trustee or not. You could certainly...
He definitely wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
No.
Yeah, so you have that going for you, right? But it would be very hard to get it away from a trust company if you named it in the will, although I wouldn't say it's impossible.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Shona. Since we're talking about conflict of interest, just thinking about if it is, let's say someone has opted for a private trustee and it's a cousin or a brother or what have you, sibling.
Yep.
And as they grow older, maybe they're in their 40s, they change their mind, but they don't really know how to go about it. What would that individual do? And what can, so some tips, because I'm just thinking about the crowd that's here, because that's some capacity building we can do early on, and educate the young person on what their rights are, because we may not be in their lives forever, right? So what is it that we can tell them right now about it?
Sahana, I will just speak from experience. And I think the more that that adult has relationship with people that care about them, those people can act on their behalf to advocate. So whether that's, if they have a relationship with Gateway, maybe Unique, they know Unique through, getting services, they can go to Unique and Unique can act as that advocate for them, right? So it's about having relationship. Sometimes the service providers are the people who start the ball rolling and help them navigate kind of the court system and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you drive home the point that Gateway tries to make quite often, which is a transition to adult services is different from transition to adulthood. And part of the transition to adulthood is transitioning into community and helping the individual build a community for themselves, right? So that they have those long-lasting supports even when the professional has stepped back. And sometimes it's a caregiver, it's a parent that might have had to step back or
exactly. Yeah.
various reasons, and that individual still has a community that speaks.
I've also seen AISH actually step in to the situation and bring up the issue to the OPGT office, and then they step back. So they'll do a report because the individual maybe has a relationship with their AISH worker, and that AISH worker will then take that information to the OPGT office. And that happened with a family I know in just this past December. And so AISH was like, well, I guess we're the only ones that this person has in their life to do something about it. So
that's awesome. That's an amazing story on so many levels. Not only was that individual able to get their AISH worker on the phone, they even had that's amazing.
This individual was able to, they went down to the AISH office. They were making noise wherever they could. So it was actually really, it was good. Not everyone can do it, but yeah.
The tip for professional caregivers: teach them how to make noise. Yes.
Teach them how to make noise. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I guess who is next? Yonique, do you have any questions? Or even if you have questions that caregivers typically ask you, just shoot them in here.
Yeah, well, I actually have one family in mind. I think you might have touched on this with Fiona's question, but the mom for age and guardianship, and the doctor she typically goes to is not the doctor that her daughter goes to, so she doesn't know her very well. So she doesn't feel comfortable, of course, filling out the application. So what would you suggest? Because I know the doctor needs to know that person.
Then I would just hire a capacity assessor.
And kind of have that background information.
Sorry, you got choppy there.
Sorry.
Can you repeat your last part of the sentence again?
Sorry, I got choppy, or Wendy?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering, what would you suggest for the parent who doesn't have a GP in place that knows the child well?
Then, like I said, I would hire a capacity assessor then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the price for a capacity?
The private capacity assessors charge up to $700.
Sorry, you said. Yeah. And what if somebody can't afford that?
That's a great question, Unique. A lot of people can't afford that. Again, trying to have a family doctor do it, a psychologist maybe that knows the person, working out maybe a payment plan with the capacity assessor up front. At this point, there's nothing that would cover that cost. That isn't even a cost that you can ask to be reimbursed for.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I have one more question. I guess just wanted to know how you're meeting parents, and do you usually meet them wherever, at a coffee shop, or do you go to their homes?
So I rent space out of a lawyer's office. I know it's very funny, a registered nurse and lawyers. And we have boardrooms there and private spaces that I meet at. I can do a lot of this over the phone just because it's collecting information. But certainly we can meet in private boardrooms as well in my office.
Great. Thank you.
Wendy, I have a question for you. You said, can you just maybe once again repeat the difference between co-decision making and supported decision making?
Okay, co-decision. So, and sorry, co and
supported.
Supported. So co-decision making, you'd talk through the decision together, but the final decision comes down to the adult.
Okay.
So, and then supported decision making gives the decision maker the ability to actually access private information like healthcare information and actually act on that individual's behalf.
Okay.
As well. Yeah.
So the supported, the decision maker, the supported decision maker has the final word and not the adult?
That is a good question. But, okay, let me just, can I go back to my slide?
You bet.
If I actually have it in there. Apologies. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to, you guys will see that it's right after. Okay. Okay, so these are the things that a supporter has the legal authority to do. oops, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then this is who they are, and then yeah, and so the supporter, you know, I can't say 100%, but I believe that that's correct. The supporter can, like, I hate to say it without knowing 100% for sure. Can I get back to you on that, Sahana?
Yeah, yeah.
Who has the final say? It might actually be the supporter in this case, but I will double check.
Okay. That's awesome, because I think that's usually some differences there. A couple of people asked for the presentation itself, and what I've shared is that without the conversation and the notes to go with it, this presentation may not make much sense. So if people need to want the presentation at their offices or want to, you know, attend the presentation again, to just get in touch with Unique. Her email is in the chat, and we can coordinate that for you. Okay, so my next question was for the trusteeship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a minimum amount of money that or a maximum amount of money the adult needs to have to get a trustee, or can they get a trustee just for their age that they receive every month?
Yep, they can get a trustee just for age.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that AISH has an AISH administrator option. What is the difference between AISH administrator and trustee? Like, you know, what do you think is the choice of least intervention?
Okay, so the AISH administrator is not held legally responsible for their decisions, whereas if you're a trustee, you're going to be held legally responsible for those decisions. Also, like they call it AISH administrator or a non, gotta think of the word. Can't think of it off the top of my head. So if you're only going to deal with AISH, I would probably take the easy route out and just do the AISH administrator. If you don't have anything like no home, no vehicle, no big savings or that kind of thing, AISH administrator is fine. You pay their bills out of it. And you're not going to be held to the same standard that a trustee is. A trustee they will be given a timeline by the court to actually submit all of the financial documents after a period of time. So maybe every 2 years, might be every 5 years, everything that you've done, every like in and out dollar amount has to be accounted for when you give those documents. So I do some of those. They're very complex. They're very time consuming to do. They'll start with what the balance of that individual's account was at the time that you became a trustee. They'll look at the final amount when you submit those documents to the court. If it's gone up or down, they'll want to know why it's gone up or down. If you're an AISH administrator, you don't have to do any of that. Once in a while, they may do an audit on the account and ask for a couple months worth of bank statements. That would be the extent of it. It has nothing to do with the courts. It doesn't have to go through the court. Whereas with the trustee, everything you do, whether you pay for a summer camp or you buy a pair of shoes, that all has to be noted in the documents that you send into the court.
Okay.
It's a job to be a trustee.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And when you talked about specific decision making, you mentioned that's very first slide, second slide.
Yes.
You said if an adult has lost the ability to consent. What are the different situations where an adult can lose? Like, what are you referring to there?
So that would be times where maybe someone comes into the hospital, they've had a stroke, they're unable to speak, they're unable to communicate, and a decision needs to be made for housing, where they're going to go. So oftentimes a family will apply to the court for, if there's no personal directive or there's nothing else in place, they'll apply for a guardianship order. But in the short term, a decision needs to be made about where they're going to go, long-term care or that kind of thing. They can allow a family member to say, like one time, that yes, I approve of them going to a long-term care home, or I approve of them going back to their home with supports in place. So it would be really time sensitive. Like a one-time decision, or they maybe have been in a car accident and not able to speak. Those would be kind of the one-off situations that happen. Yeah, or be under the influence of medication would be another reason. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is, let's say there's an individual, they have a private guardian and a private trustee. Let's say there's like $100,000 in the trusteeship, in the whatever the estate, and but the adult that they're supporting is now 26 and chronically disconnected, so homeless and unable and unwilling to stay in any one place. What is the responsibility of the guardian and the trustee in that case?
So if you have a full guardianship and a full trusteeship, you can make an application. Like, you would have to have the police involved. It does happen to pick them up under, you have to go to the court and ask for them to be, because you're the guardian and the trustee, you can actually have them picked up and taken back to their home and put into like a secure facility. You can do all kinds of things as a guardian and trustee. I think that as a parent, you should remember that if you may act as a guardian with, again, your set of values and your set of beliefs, but that guardianship can be then transferred to someone else who may apply a really different standard to the care that your loved one gets. So as a trustee, you can ensure that that individual can never access any of their resources, any finances. These are the things that these court orders give. They really do take away all the rights of the adults involved.
So if the adult doesn't engage with their guardian or trustee, but choose to remain homeless, or choose to be out there, there's nothing anyone can do.
Well, no, the guardian can apply to the court for the police to pick that individual up and keep them home.
On what basis? What if they're not abusing any substances and just choosing to be out there?
No, that's it, Sahana, is that as an adult, you don't have any rights to make decisions about yourself once a guardianship is in place. You have lost the right to make bad decisions for yourself, whereas we're allowed to live with risk. An individual that has a guardianship order may have a guardian that won't allow them to live with risk. And so I think those are really important things that I'm really exploring too as a person who does the applications. I'm aware that these things do take away the rights of that adult. And so exploring maybe co-decision making is a better option for some people.
Wendy. Any other questions for people? Don't see anyone having a question. Wendy, did you want to, I'm just thinking because, this presentation, especially when you're a service provider supporting people, there's so many scenarios. Every scenario is different, like you said. And are there any complex examples that you have, been a part of that you'd like to share? Examples that elucidate the nuances of.
I'd love to share a couple examples. One is a little bit more to do with the estate planning, and you know, I've learned a lot just being in an estate lawyer's office. And we had a gentleman who came in, the brothers were all in their 60s, all 2 years apart. And the will was, the executor on the will was the eldest brother. Mm-hmm. And then all three brothers were named as, named in the will as being able to have access to the parents' financial resources. And it was divided up equally. But because the eldest son was the guardian of his middle brother, and he was also the executor on the estate, the estate was unable to be settled until a limited trustee was named for the middle brother. That process took about 8 months. And so I think like sitting down with somebody that knows how to do like estate planning is really important. So what we needed to do was then apply to the court to have the public trustee become the trustee for a limited period of time. And that was the period of time that it took them to look at the will and ensure that the best interests of that middle son were being looked after. And then once that was resolved, the eldest brother was allowed to go back to being the trustee and guardian of his brother. So if you have an estate and you're leaving it to your children, just keep that in mind. You might want to name a different executor than who is ever named in the will. That was quite a complex thing, and that had to do with limited trusteeship. Mm-hmm. Again, you know, one of our big ones was a gentleman who really didn't want to have a guardianship or trusteeship order. At 18, it was fine. He's coming out of being a youth, and having his parents take on that role was very normal. But by the time he was 28, that was not something he wanted anymore. He really wanted to be able to make those decisions on his own and for himself. That's the man who got Aish involved and, you know, kicked up a storm to the point where he actually went and got an updated capacity assessment. And what's so interesting is that at 18, when you read his capacity assessment with things like, is this disability permanent? Yes. Will this disability change? No. Is this individual able to make decisions in these areas? No, 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 no. 10 years later, when he has his own relationship with his physician, this physician filled in that capacity assessment much differently. Is this individual able to make decisions on their own? Yes. Can they make decisions about housing? Yes. And so that application went back in front of the court with the new capacity assessment, and it was reversed. Mm-hmm. So you can go from having no say in your life for 10 years to having full ability to manage all of your resources and all of your decision making. Mm. So yeah.
Okay. Interesting scenarios.
Yeah. Always something, I think you have to remember too is, like, I feel comfortable as being a guardian to my son that I'm going to respect his decisions, and, you know, I really want what's best for him and I listen to him. But another guardian could take over if something happened to me and, you know, choose really different things for how he's going to live his life. So that's why exploring those other options like co-decision making may be better, because it does allow the adult to have a say in what they want in their life. Mm-hmm. And Sahana, I'd also like to say is never underestimate yourself as a service provider in what you can provide in terms of support to individuals. Never just think, well, I'm just the service provider and the family knows better. Sometimes your relationship with the adult is one where you're very close and understand, you know, they're able to share with you what they want and what their dreams are for their life and what their goals are. And you can definitely be part of that process. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we did have a case where we named one of the local service providers on the guardianship application so that they were made aware that this guardianship was happening. And if they wanted to have some input, they could actually bring that to the court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Any questions? Anyone else? I don't see any other questions coming up, so I'm going to. Sorry, someone has a question.
Yeah, it's Brenalyn. Sorry, I knew.
I couldn't see you.
Sorry, it's just last minute question. So with the trusteeship, so if in case the adult will say, will refuse to do that, and she said, okay, I don't need that, though the evidence we have is like she needs to have that trusteeship for financial decisions. Is there any way that we could go around that if she refused to have one?
Yeah, the capacity assessor would make that decision. The capacity assessor would assess her ability to make those decisions.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Just going to give another minute for other questions. So Wendy, you're back on at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you for that. We will go through this process again. We have quite a few people signed up. And for those of you that are still out here, just want to read what next week's conversation is going to be about. So with over 20 years of continuous service in human service sector, Jinan Nasruddin has extensive experience supporting and advocating for Alberta's most vulnerable population. She specializes in the area of trauma, addiction, gang affiliation, and sexual exploitation. Jinan will share mental health and addiction resources in Edmonton, Leduc, St. Albert, Sherwood Park. That's available for folks that are not eligible for PDD. Jinan will tackle each resource as to who is it's available for, how to access it, what the role of the individual is, what's the role of the caregiver that's supporting the individual, and you know, what demographic is best in each resource. And she will also speak to how these same resources for mental health and addictions are operating during social distancing and during COVID-19. So tune in for that conversation. It's on May 13th, next Wednesday, at the same format, 1 to 3 p.m. and 7 to 9 p.m. Gateway's interest in bringing this particular topic as part of our online series was because, you know, once someone is eligible for PDD, there's an assumption that there are a lot of services available for that individual, or people are looking out for them. But that's not necessarily the case. And they end up falling in the same situation as those that are not eligible for PDD and needing to have to access Alberta Health Services for certain supports. So Janan's going to talk about, you know, what the resources are, how many of them can be accessed while receiving PDD, and how many are just for those not receiving PDD, and can help make that distinction. And think about this resource as something that all of us might need to know about, if not for the people that we're supporting, just for anybody out there, you know, because this is not really limited to persons with disability. This is for all Albertans, what's out there. So please tune in. Since there's no one else with a question, we can sign off. Thank you, Wendy, very much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for all the questions, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Sahana.
Bye.
Thank you, Susanna.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.